to solve it
Okay.
back on. So I'm just starting there.
Evening and welcome to the fifth meeting of the Inner West London JOSC. Apologies for the late start as we had some technical difficulties. The JOSC has now completed its scrutiny of the pre-consultation business case, which sets out the proposals to substantially reconfigure local NHS mental health services. The JOSC is required to submit its evidence-based and independent conclusions by the 1st of March 2024. The report attached at agenda item 6 is a draft of the JOSC response, and which we will be discussing at this evening's meeting. This meeting will therefore be run differently to usual, as the JOSC will not be hearing from speakers or residents, but instead discussing and agreeing the response to be provided to CNWO and ICB. I'd like to put my thanks on records to my colleagues who are members of this committee, as well as the representations we have received from CNWO and the ICB, Health Watch, Professor Jill Mandel, and organisations in the community and the voluntary sector. Item 2, apologies for absence. The second item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I have received none, so I will move on. We will now move on to item 3, which is declarations of interest. Can I please ask attendees if they have any declarations of interest to declare?
I'm an NHS worker and a forensic psychiatrist.
Thank you. Noted. Okay, we've had one declaration of interest declared. Item 4, the minutes will be agreed at the next meeting. Item 5. As mentioned earlier, the JOSC was given an extension to the 1st of March to respond to CNWR and the ICB regarding the pre-consultation business case. The members wish to make any amendments or ask for clarifications on this response. Okay, I will move on to the pre-consultation business case, and I'll raise the points within, and we can then look at them systematically and be able to decide from them. I'll start off with item 3.1, the Mental Health Crisis Assessment Service, which is known as the MCAS. The first recommendation here is the Mental Health Crisis Assessment Service model is further developed in advance of any decision being made, in consultation with and using a co-production approach that involves partner organisations, including councils, stakeholders, and the local community. Under this, there are a number of ways how that could be done or that wasn't done previously. Do members have any comments they would like to make on what is written under the recommendations here?
Thank you, Chair. So I just have one comment, which is about the co-production approach. And I feel we've discussed that a few times during all of these meetings. And I think I've just felt that there were different interpretations of what that might mean and how it might look when working with partner organisations. So I just wondered whether we wanted to add something that was more specific about what we might expect.
Specifics around expectations.
Yes.
Okay. Noted, yes.
Because it doesn't just mean have a meeting with them.
Yeah. And I think I can expand on that point. What I mentioned at the last meeting, we were given, we could actually to understand what engagement means from CNWL, because what we understood was their engagement with 200,000 people, and then later understood that that meant clicks on social media. And in terms of numbers of people at meetings, it was significantly less, somewhere between 450 and 600 people. So I think as a recommendation to look at that a bit more specifically to understand the meaning of engagement from CNWL's perspective.
It's
Okay. Just checking, we couldn't ask you that now, but probably best to put it in the report.
Okay.
We also get a bit more clarity on 3.13. I think we would like to have some information on that. And see that it has actually been thought about.
A bit more specific in terms of
Yes.
information.
More specific so that we actually have an idea of that, of the thought process behind that.
How it came about and why. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just in addition to that, how the increased throughput through the MCAS service with the additional beds, how that was going to be matched up with similar increase in home treatment team and community crisis team provisions. Because if there's going to be an increased throughput through MCAS and discharges through MCAS, there does also need to be additional support from the crisis resolution and home treatment teams. And also just an appreciation that whilst the MCAS model is an excellent one, it doesn't provide an alternative to admission. So that they are two very separate things. An MCAS stay and an inpatient stay, two very different things.
At the last meeting, I mean, we had an expansion on the point that the MCAS will serve in a slightly different way, where it will also be able to have patients who are held for a slightly longer time. With that in mind, we possibly want to expand on what you say, what you've said, and look at that as a whole to understand it even better.
Yeah, I mean, the whole MCAS model is about something that's a very time-limited intervention. In order for it to work, there needs to be community services ready to take over, which is why I'm sort of hammering this point about additional services in the community take over for people that have been discharged from the MCAS. And that even with the additional hours, I think we were told it could be up to 72 hours that people could be held. That's still a very time limited. It's not comparable to an average inpatient stay admission, which is around, I think, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Albert. Can I make a very small clarification?
Yeah.
It's worthwhile remembering that our inpatient wards also have very short stays. So it is possible that someone would get admitted to an inpatient ward and then we'd be able to link them with the support and discharge them. So the MCAS can provide what they would have ordinarily have got if they went into an inpatient ward, because our portion of stays are very short, albeit our average is 28 to 32 days.
When you say very short, do you mind?
We could have someone come into an inpatient ward for 24, 48, 72 hours. It's the MCAS is providing an opportunity to service some of those patients as well.
What's the percentage of patients that might have?
I don't know that off the top of my head. It's a small but not insignificant number of patients that would have a very short stay in an acute ward. So they would have presented, been assessed, potentially a mental health act used, and then when we've been able to settle, get medication started, titrate for clozapine, etc., then we could consider moving into the community. So MCAS will have that opportunity and divert people away from inpatient wards.
I mean, in those instances is great because the person is well known to the community services, short crisis periods admission to get them back on track, and then they're back out again to the community teams that they're already under. I guess it's that group of people who are presenting in crisis, who it might be their first time in services, and they still haven't kind of found their team yet or their path in terms of treatment. So I think it's a different type of patient maybe that can come in and out, and I think for them, obviously MCAS is excellent, and not to take away from this model at all. Obviously it works very well, and it would be great to have additional MCAS beds, but I think there does need to be an appreciation that it's not an alternative to an inpatient admission.
And it was never designed to be, so it's designed to support people in crisis with
Yeah.
a more intensive
Good, yeah.
workup.
Looking at point 3.1.2, just adding to that sentence, the first sentence after less restrictive setting. That these are patients who are not in need of acute inpatient facilities at the time of presenting to the MPAS. Similarly, at 3.1.4, including here that monitoring acute mental health pathways should be considered more in the proposal, especially when stress testing the current provision and using NHSE national indicators. And again, a point of clarity, we're looking at 3 points. We'll do that when we get over there. And then the last one, I think, on this bit for me is 3.1.1. Expansion needed on the point about needing inpatient beds, the last sentence. It's unclear how long patients will be able to stay in the MCAS beds beyond the indicated maximum of 2 days. People are acutely unwell, would have their treatments delayed and abruptly stopped in order to be transferred to a long-stay hospital to resume their treatment.
So people can't have treatment started in the MCAS, which is why we've got the medical model and we've got an enriched MGT. So it is possible to start treatment while, if they did need a longer stay bed, we would source that bed for them and move them at the earliest possible point. But we wouldn't delay the start of treatment because if they moved to another bed, if that was required, we would absolutely start treatment.
And when you say start treatment, that means all of the different treatments that they will need, or just particular stopgaps, if you can explain what that
No, it would be starting the treatments that are required. So mostly it would be starting or titrating medication for them so we can get them on the right medication, or patients on the right medication if that is what's required. Or there's a therapeutic NDT there that can initiate other forms of therapy if that is what's required at the time. But we wouldn't be delaying any treatment until they move to an acute bed.
I think in recognition of that, especially so around therapeutic interventions, the continuity of therapeutic care when moving from one place to another should be something that we look at as well. Because if you do start therapeutic care within one setting and you move to another, that continuation could be disruptive as a process, and just recognizing that potential issue. Just look through to make sure there's nothing else in this. Do you have anything else on the A&E? So looking at 3.1.3.
No, I just had it, so really wanted to read.
Okay. I think we've had clarity on the 3.1.5, which is if the board has the MPAS, use St Charles and Castle. And I think specific concerns around training and retention and what that looks like, and recruitment as well. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the financial case. So here would be the recommendation 2, the financial case needs to be developed further. There are a number of points under this. I'll look at 3.2.2. There are 2 points on that one. So regarding the 100 additional staff, it's unclear where the staff are dedicated and whether across Westminster, ANC, or overall on sort of CNW as a whole. Can we clarify?
And it's my understanding that they're all KCW staff, but we can't get that clarity for you.
And clarity around the roles as well. I
Yeah.
think for us, it'd be good to understand what that looks like. And similarly, it's still unclear how the extra funding from central government to help develop mental health services has been utilised. This is the additional grant. We've asked for that previously.
Yeah, and sorry, I've just had confirmation. It is KCW staff, the 100, and we are looking at ways of presenting that you can use with your constituents as well. So we have got that action, and we'll get that back to you.
Okay. That would be great. We have any other questions on the financial test?
Just to clarify, it's 5.4 million a year, isn't it?
Yeah.
So 5.4 million times 3, isn't it? Is that right?
No, we have for this service on an annual basis. So it was 5.4 million a year.
Every year since 2020.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 5.4 times 3. 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Expenditure per year.
So it's an additional, let's say, 40 million. Okay, right?
No, because we can only spend it's spent every year 5.4 million, so we're not spending it 4 times. It's what we spend every year that we're not spending on the original inpatient wards.
And the grants that's for you so far, just to clarify again, that is 5 hour KCW.
Yeah.
And not. Okay, we'll move on to the next point, which is on admissions. Recommendation 3. Proposal does not reflect the need for inpatient beds to mitigate the pressures of admissions across the 2 local authorities. This should be considered. And the second recommendation on the admission is there should be more in-depth analysis provided on the impact of proposals across the groups disproportionately admitted into mental health inpatient care. Okay, members, do we have any points of order to raise on this one?
I think disproportionately admitted into mental health inpatient care, but also disproportionately represented in the additional caseload referrals that have happened since the closure. So there have been certain specific groups that have been, you have seen much higher increase in rates of referrals to the community teams since the closures. I don't understand, such as women, for example, such as the increased rates of Black people who are turning up to A&E, self-presenting to A&E.
And getting that in data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not just admitted into mental health inpatient care, but all those other areas where they present us as well.
Yeah. Okay, sure. Okay. And move on from those to bed occupancy. Availability. The recommendation on recommendation 5, the proposal should be flexible to take into account the unique location of the local authorities and the challenges around beds and occupancy to specifically address the homeless population and high level of visitors. I think beyond visitors, we've also got, by the transient population, at times there are aspects that are transient.
Can I just clarify on that one,
Yeah.
Councillor Albert, the service provided within the Gordon was for the resident population of Kensington, Chelsea and Westminster. So I do appreciate that there is a significant transient population for visitors that come in to both Westminster and the Royal Borough. But the way mental health services are commissioned is to bring people back to their local system so that they get that connection with families, their care settings, social services, etc. So I do appreciate there's a large visiting population coming in, but the bed base didn't address that, if that makes sense.
Right. And so what happens then with international people with asylum seekers and don't yet have this?
So if there's an international visitor, then there is work with the ICB and with the Department of Health to support in an emergency and then repatriate back to their home country. And with asylum seekers, then if they've got recourse to public funds, they'll get treated in their local area, and if not, they'll work with the right agencies to get the support for them. But for UK national visitors or tourists coming into the borough, that wouldn't have been a service that was immediately offered from the original boarding hospital bed.
I'm sorry, in terms of so not just asylum seekers, but also people who are not registered at all. That's, you know, so when I say sorry, what I meant when I said asylum seekers, not just people who have lodged their case and are going through, people who are failed asylum seekers. We do know there's a significant mental health impact on those people as well. What happens because they won't have a place of sort of far home to go to?
Yeah, so care is always provided free at the point of admission. So, and in emergencies, everyone will be treated as equals and presented as the person in front of them. We'll then work with appropriate authorities if there is a need for longer term care to make sure that care is offered.
But I mean, they would turn up in Westminster simply, simply because of placement. What happens in those circumstances? That's what we would be keen to understand.
Yeah, so I don't have the 100% of the details to hand, but our liaison teams and others, and if they were to go into the MCAS, they will get seen, treated and supported. And I need to double check on the...
Graham, not the MCAS, before the MCAS.
Yeah. So someone attends an A&E in crisis or picked up by the police or in any of the other access routes into urgent and emergency care, they will be treated like any individual would be. They would be assessed and supported. And if necessary, we will find a bed for them, but then we will take the funds to support that or move them to a more appropriate place.
So it would never have been the Gordon in that case. In those cases that I've just described, they would never ever have gone to the Gordon.
Well, they may have done it if there was a bed available.
Just considering the fact that obviously Westminster is near Victoria Station, UCH near Euston, there are people from all over the country in crisis who will sort of turn up in London for various reasons to these main stations. How do we fund those individuals? Is it our own ICB that has that?
No, it's the ICB where if they're registered in practice or where they normally live.
Okay.
And that's if they're a UK registered person.
So someone being admitted to the Gordon in crisis from
very unlikely.
Middlesbrough.
So if someone from Middlesbrough turned up in or picked up by the police and were brought to a place of safety, and that might be one of our health-based places of safety, we would be working with their host ICB to get a bed back in their local place of care. If they were unable to get a bed, then we may organise a short admission, but that would be while we work out a route to get them back.
But that short admission is not going to be paid for by
not
our own
ICB. It would be paid
the relevant ICB gets billed. Yeah,
absolutely.
What in terms of homeless people? Because obviously there's a big homeless community in Westminster. So if someone isn't essentially they consider themselves that that is where they live.
Yeah, and we would consider that's where they live as
Okay.
well. So if someone is ordinarily in Westminster
That is
as a homeless person, then we will absolutely treat them as a resident.
So that goes back to,
And there is, I don't know, I couldn't pinpoint it myself right now, but there is an analysis of this in the PCBC as well, which shows the actual numbers that we're talking about, which are relatively small.
And we don't need additional beds earmarked specifically for that community.
The way we've factored that for our homeless communities, we've factored into our bed modelling numbers.
what about for the people who are sadly turning up because bad things happen in their countries and they are not yet processed? They are homeless for that reason, so they're not an ICB.
Again, we would say very small numbers that we would see coming through our services for long inpatient stays, but we will support until we can support that individual at the next stage of their personal journey as well.
And that's factored into the business cost.
Yes.
Well, sorry, this has been asked before, but just in terms of some of those groups we've just spoken about and this model of care, what happens if someone, for example, is taken into the MCAS and doesn't necessarily need an inpatient bed, or they might have an inpatient bed, but then they are processed back into community care, which is built around them. If there's somebody who's homeless who doesn't have a home, how does that community care work?
We would never discharge someone to the streets.
No, I
So-
appreciate that, but if someone's sort of going back and forth even after you've discharged them, how does that kind of?
So within the NCAS model, but actually already in our liaison teams, we work very closely with British Red Cross, and they're particularly good at working with individuals who don't have recourse to public funds, but they will work with any of our service users to help, locate and settle, link with social services, get them registered, and do all that work on the brand.
So I think that was one aspect that was brought up by councillors in the RVKC was in terms of arts court and how that looked like if you didn't have a permanent home or if it was people who
Clearly, but we both Georgie staff, the George homeless team as well. That's a big part of theirs job and remit to support individuals with housing needs. I'm sorry, just to clarify, any asylum seeker who has housing in North West London be treated as a North West London resident in terms of their treatment and care.
Okay, we'll move on to recommendation. What's next? Actually short. Yes, recommendation 6. Alternative local sites. A new hospital site to be considered for the future, and in the more immediate term, alternative sites for more acute mental health beds should be revisited. Do we have any comments in this section? Question. On our last just we were told that there are these from the annual savings. There were 8 beds that were on the border of KNC and Westminster. Do you know where they are?
Is it the step down beds that you're referring?
No,
it's inpatient beds, yeah.
Inpatient beds on the border of
KNC and Westminster. We didn't quite. It was right again to make really go further.
So we have funded with the savings from the Gordon that's in part helped to fund our step down bed provision, and trying to remember exactly where the the beds are that we have in Kensington, Chelsea and Westminster. That there is also the Brent beds that you're aware of.
Yeah.
And 8 of them were funded in Brent. That's the acute beds for the step down. We've got step down provision across the whole of the trust, and about 8 of them have been funded from the Gordon savings to support KCW residents.
But in
Where exactly you're
Yeah.
asking, let me double check where the step down beds are.
Whether they're funded by.
Are those not the ones that were in North Paddington that were closed?
well, those are the crisis beds.
No, that they were the crisis
Yeah, they're
beds.
bad.
We have both crisis and
Yeah.
step down beds at one point, and we've merged the provision into one. Like from memory, they're in the Hyde Park estate, but I'm just double checking that.
Conditions as a type of it.
Not be on the board up now. That's not.
No, it's not on the border.
There's 8 additional beds in Brent.
That's the only thing I know of is going to Brent. But we were told there were
Yeah,
Board of KNC and Westminster.
okay, I'm just
That's-
double checking.
Yeah, no, it would be really good to know because if it was said there on, when I think of the border against and Westminster, I think of the border, not
Brent.
Yeah.
But in here it says otherwise if you learn and there's an addition to the time we vote in 8 additional beds in Brent at a temporary location and expand that to additional bed. I'm just trying to work out that was what we were speaking about.
So we currently have 8 additional beds that we run out of the Kingsbury unit, which is in Brent. And they will move into our Park Royal site, which is just going through a refurb now. They'll open 16 beds. Does Portgate mean anything to people?
I mean, that could be
No.
what we're speaking about in terms of would savings from the Gordon's finances have gone into those temporary 8 beds?
Some have, yes, and that's in recognition that the Gordon always had rent patients in them. But it might well be we've completed the
Yeah.
2 things.
So, but I guess we're back to the not having answered then the impact of the savings on KNC, KCW. We haven't received, because that was the only impact that we were told was those 8 beds. So in terms of savings, I think we're still got that standing question around what's the impact that we've received over the 4,
If none of the money has been saved, it's all been reinvested.
Yes, that's what the reinvestment, what reinvestment has happened.
Yeah,
in
so
KCW.
it's listed in the PCBC all the elements that money has gone into, but we do recognise it could be presented in a clearer way. And again, that's the thing that we will come back to you to see if there's an easier way of presenting that information. But it is all listed, all the lines.
I think less easier and more clear, as in transparent, where we can understand, like, for example, these 8 beds that we were told in KCW are not in KCW at all, they're in Brent, for example.
Yeah.
And to be clear that this reinvested money was in Brent and not in KCW, for example,
Yeah.
just so we can understand.
Yeah, but we did list out MCAS, the CAS team, which is the crisis assessment teams, the voluntary sector, the step down beds. These are all things that came from that 5.4 million. So it is listed there, but we can try and make that clearer.
Yeah, it would just be helpful to know what proportion of that money went where. So what proportion went to inpatient versus community. So I don't think that while it was sort of outlined in a really helpful way, there were some kind of basic questions that we still had.
Yeah. Okay. Well, No, but we did commit to look at that. See if
Oh,
there's
okay,
another way.
okay.
Yeah, but we will come back with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are the fix.
And sorry, what were the additional beds that, because I wasn't aware that some of that money saved had gone into beds. What were the beds that you just mentioned that had?
They are the additional bed provision, which is 2.5 of the figure 55.
And step down, we said wasn't locked rehab, it was sort of.
No, it's not. It's absolutely a provision for people who are clinically ready for discharge,
Right.
but for whatever reason, normally a housing issue,
Yeah,
we've not been able to move them back
Yeah.
to their housing.
because it's a real shame that that money has gone to something so non-clinical in some ways. I appreciate,
Yeah.
I appreciate that, you know, you don't want people in those beds, they don't need to be in those really precious clinical inpatient
Yeah.
beds, but for money that was, that came from an inpatient facility to be diverted to a facility that is just about we hope the step down it is just flats, isn't it? It's not there isn't an NPT there. There are clinical interventions there.
It's supported accommodation, so there are live-in staff that will support the individuals that are there, but they will have in-reach support from our home treatment teams. So if a person is admitted into one of our step downs, they will have ongoing clinical support. I'll be brutally honest, I would agree with you, but there is a need that we are addressing with these individuals.
But it shouldn't come from money that's been diverted from the closure of inpatient beds. It should come from some other pot.
But it is
social
also
care,
a recognition that
Yeah.
right now, and even with this provision, we still in KCW have about 25 patients who are in an inpatient bed at the minute that don't need to be, and that's with the step down provision that we have. So there is absolutely a need and something that needs to be addressed. We need to support our patients right now.
Sorry, isn't there some criteria about the step down beds, which is that you have to sort of not have accommodation and not many friends and things like that?
Well, and indeed, or you could have accommodation that may have had a police intervention to go and check on someone so there isn't a door, or you may have been a hoarder and your accommodation isn't safe.
I thought they were young people though as well.
No, they're
It's not the one under the home treatment team. That service. I've seen a video with an OT.
Potentially, but it's for our 18 to 65-year-olds and acute adults, not specifically.
Maybe we can check that up, because I thought there were specific criteria, which I've forgotten where it is. It's somewhere in Paddington area.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely in the and it's sure it's a high plug estate. I think that the saying right.
I thought it was sort of house.
Yeah, it is. It is a house.
Anyway, so there's this great video with the OT who ran it. But again, I thought that it was, again, whether or not it's still going or whatever might be checked.
The step down beds are definitely still going.
Yeah. And but I'm pretty sure the criteria are quite limited. Yeah.
Fairly flexible.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, well, thank you for that. And just for us, I think that would be a good thing to pick up on, and for us to look at the criteria around step down beds to understand that a bit more. So if I could note that. So we're at the end of the sort of informal interpretive recommendation, but for instance, there's something that wasn't said, and not even just because it wasn't on here, I still want to mention it. And it's going back to the quality of the consultation. And I think a unanimous feeling on the panel around it, sort of being somewhat misleading, and the results that may then come out of it may not be valid based on this, simply because of how it was how it was presented and written with options being developed, option 1 and 2 not really developed, or, all the number of things, the way that it was, the engagement was done. And again, just there's something that we shouldn't, for me, it feels like the elephant in the room, and I want to make sure that we make that clearer within all of this. I agree with 100%.
And also engagement with the community groups.
Yeah.
Again, I feel like there's a little bit of a mismatch between what we think of community groups and those that have actually been consulted with.
Yeah. And residents, and I think again, alongside all of these, how people are counted, because, for example, we can think of a resident and groups of people who go along to the same meetings, and whether they were double, triple, quadruple counted.
Absolutely. You will see as we develop the decision-making business case and the outputs from the consultation, the range of organisations it was spoken to. And you made the point earlier, and it is right. There's a difference in reach and actually talking and engaging with individuals. But when we have looked at the people who have attended the various sessions, we've taken out the double counting because numerous people have attended everything. So we would only count that as one individual engagement, not multiple.
I think the same would apply. I remember reading last time about your engagement with service users. What that engagement means is that you're reaching out to service users, and how many have actually been spoken to.
Yeah. So we've done
differentiation in the way it's noted and actually what really happened.
Yeah. So we have to reach service users, we've written to a number of current and previous service users and those that have experienced care in the Gordon as well as in St Charles, but we've also gone on towards to talk to people who are receiving care right now and gone into our community groups, and all that will be articulated and as we sort of gather the evidence and feedback and put that together. So you will absolutely see that. But I'm sad to hear, but understand why you feel that we haven't engaged as much as you would like. But I hope you'll get some reassurance when you see some of this stuff coming out who we have talked to and how we've tried to engage and have those conversations with both service users and a whole range of organisations as well.
Without wanting to go on about this again, I mean, just even the very unwell people, the way the consultation was designed, I certainly felt that those who really need beds the most were not really able to engage with the consultation. I mean, if you're very unwell, you're not going to come to a group, you're not going to go on, you're not going to go to an online forum to discuss, your needs. So, or almost the residents that were most affected by these changes felt like they weren't really given the opportunity to engage with this.
There have been a whole range of residents and service users that have relatively recent experience. It will be in a very different place right now that we certainly have attempted to engage through the consultation process and carers, as well as the representative service users that we have in our trust and other voluntary sector organisations that we work with. So we will be pulling all that together for you as we move to the decision making business case and it goes through the next stages of iteration. And should also add, we did actively go on to our wards to have sensitive but managed conversations with people who are actively receiving acute care right now.
And just to add to that, really, looking back at the time period where the consultation was done specifically around over Christmas, New Year, and whether also, because one of the examples we were given was the maternity. Was the maternity consultation that was done, and we were told, this was done in that particular time, and whether that's comparable to this to the same degree. So you must look at the time in the same way. Have we given this as much time as possible to ensure that the right questions were asked and answered, and whether there was time to changed questions, and when you were building the business case initially, that all the right questions were asked in that time as well. So I think there's a mixture of things in that.
Just
pulled up on.
I know you're all very well aware of this, but the statutory duty to consult is 12 weeks, and we deliberately went to 14 weeks initially because we knew that we were brushing up against the Christmas period, and of course there was a whole pre-consultation engagement that happened to that point, and then through the consultation we extended by another 2 weeks. So I think the point we were trying to make, and sorry if it didn't land, was that some of these other really significant changes that have happened in healthcare sphere in our local areas were 12-week processes, and we've gone to 16, partially recognising the period that we were going through on the holidays and things that would brush up against.
I think for us, we do understand the sort of statutory recommendation, but recognising that with the sort of a lot of what you've heard throughout that time, sort of the discontent of people who have spoken around what consultation looks like, whether they were engaged or consulted, but it would have benefited from a longer period of time for this reason, and to be able to look at that as recommendation and look at this on its individual merits based on those particular points.
I also just think generally in terms of consultations, the Christmas period it's such a difficult period.
Yeah.
People go away at different times. And I mean, as a recommendation for future consultations, I just think it's a terrible time to be running events. I mean, it's people have a lot going on in December as it is, and trying to get people come to engagement events or meetings and lots of different things, and people go home to their families. It's just probably not the best time to be running something that is time pressured to 12 weeks. Would be my strong advice. And I think you've touched on this before, but I also think just generally for the next process that I see of a consultation like this, I do always think that each option should always be sort of explored in the same way and the same merits and with the same sort of tone of language. That actually I completely appreciate that you had your thoughts attached to your option, but I think otherwise it closes people's minds to really viewing language as very negative. So even if someone was engaging who didn't know a huge amount about this area, they're going to be sort of very much drawn in your direction. When that's just a point of view that I think should be noted.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that came up throughout our time together, we had a lot of feedback from CWL around the building itself and the descriptions around sort of things like low ceilings, not having en suites and things like that. Whereas the concerns we've had from residents have been also, not for people who contributed, have been around sort of staffing, retention, like therapies being offered, and really being able to look at that as its own piece within the report, and the work that's needed, because whether it's an MCAS or something else, that in itself continues to be an issue. Do we have anything else you want to? Right. Okay, so I'll move on to item 9. Do any members have any other urgent business to raise? I have one, just to understand here, when will we receive the decision-making business case?
Oh, it's a very good question. So we're waiting for your formal feedback. From this, we'll be working up the decision-making business case with a view to that going in July to the ICB board. The exact date that'll be published, I don't know, but it'll be end of June, start of July, I would imagine. But we continue, and we did commit to continue our engagements with yourselves, if there's anything we can do that'd be helpful, with residents and other organisations, and that will feed in. And I think we committed the last time we met here last week that we'll share with you the the engagement process to help us build the decision-making business case, we'll get to you as well.
Right, yeah. That's good. Yeah, sort of, so the time frame will just sort of clarify, so I feel like I've captured it. Sorry, everyone, you
Yeah.
might have got this. Once we get you our report, you will then work on that and then possibly around June sometime.
Yeah, so we'll publish a response report, and that should be in the next 6 weeks or so following the receipt of
Thank you.
your, and then we'll have the decision-making business case, which will be ready at end of June, start of July for the ICB board to make their decision. We also, just to remind you, we know you'll be on recess, the right word, you'll be breaking for the summer, it sounds very American, and you'll be meeting again to review the decision-making business case. We will not implement anything until you've had the chance to scrutinize and look at that.
Thank you, that's helpful. Okay, with that being said, do members agree to the content of the report subject to the amendments which we have spoken about? Yep. Okay, well, in that case, I will formally terminate the meeting. Time is 7:58.
Well done.
Can't believe it.
It's on second.
Well done, Constance.